Off the southern English coast, in the black before dawn, a giant oil tanker drifts without permission. Her crew has locked themselves on the bridge. Below them, somewhere in the steel corridors, stowaways move through the dark. Then the sound arrives. Rotor blades, low and hammering, sweeping in over a gray October sea. Black-clad figures spill out of helicopters and fast rope onto the deck. Balaclavas tight, weapons up, moving like water, finding a crack. In under 15 minutes, the ship is theirs again, every stowaway pinned to the deck. The British government confirms almost nothing. The men vanish. No faces. No names. However, that silence is the whole point. Because the unit that boarded that tanker may be the most secretive special forces outfit in the Western world, and almost nobody outside Britain can name it. You have heard of the SAS. Everyone has. But the men who climbed onto that tanker were not the SAS. They were the Special Boat Service, the SBS, and the strange truth is that they are deliberately built to be harder to see. If you want the story the official record keeps trying to bury, subscribe now, because we are going under the surface of Britain's quietest knife. Let us start with what the SBS actually is, because most people get this wrong. The SBS is the United Kingdom's Maritime Tier 1 Special Forces Unit. Tier 1 means the very top, the sharpest end of the spear, the men a nation sends when failure is not survivable. Where the SAS grew out of the Desert War and the Army, the SBS grew out of the sea. Its operators are drawn mainly from the Royal Marines, the green-beretted commandos who already pass one of the hardest infantry courses on Earth before they even think about trying out. The unit is based at a quiet town called Poole, on the Dorset coast in the south of England, a place of grey water and small craft and unremarkable buildings that hide one of the most capable raiding forces alive. And the sea was there from the very beginning. The roots of the unit reach back to the Second World War, to small bands of British raiders who slipped onto enemy coastlines in flimsy canoes, to plant explosives and gather intelligence under the noses of occupying forces. They paddled out of submarines in the dark. They folded themselves into tiny collapsible craft and crossed cold water that should have killed them. Many never came back. Out of that desperate, improvised work grew a permanent idea that a handful of men who could arrive from the water, strike, and disappear were worth more than a battalion arriving the obvious way. That idea never left. Everything the modern SBS does is built on it, the belief that the most powerful place to come from is the place the enemy is not watching, the waterline, the dark, the gap between low tide and dawn. And here is the structure that matters. The SBS does not float free. It sits alongside the SAS under a single command called the United Kingdom Special Forces Directorate, the UKSF. 2 blades, 1 handle. But the 2 blades are not treated the same way by the public, by the press, or by the men who run them. The SAS became a legend. The SBS became a rumor. But why? Why is one smallest and the other a ghost? Hold that question, because the answer is not an accident. Think about how the SAS entered the public mind. In 1980, gunmen seized the Iranian embassy in London. For 6 days, the world watched the building on live television. Then, on the 6th day, men in black abseiled down the front of the building, blew the windows in, and stormed inside while the cameras rolled. It was broadcast into living rooms across Britain in real time. The SAS did not just win that day. They were seen winning. That footage made them famous forever. The SBS has almost no moment like that. Its work happens at night, at sea, on hulls and beaches and oil rigs, far from any camera. There was no live broadcast of a frogman surfacing beside a darkened ship. And so the legend never formed in the same way. You cannot become a household name doing things nobody is allowed to film. There is a second reason, and it is about size. The SBS is smaller than the SAS. A smaller unit produces fewer veterans, which means fewer people who have ever served, which means fewer people who could ever talk. The pool of men who know the stories is simply tinier, and a tiny pool is far easier to keep quiet. The third reason is culture, and this one runs deep. The SBS comes out of the Royal Marines, and the Marine ethos prizes a kind of gray humility, doing the hard thing and saying nothing about it. Quiet professionalism is not a slogan there. It is the water they swim in. The SAS produced a wave of famous memoirs in the 1990s, blockbuster books by former operators that put the unit on every airport shelf. The SBS produced almost none of that. The men did not write. They went back to the sea. And the fourth reason is the hardest edge of all. The British Ministry of Defence, the MOD, clamps down harder on the SBS than on almost anything else it controls. The standing British policy is that the government does not comment on Special Forces operations at all. But around the SBS, that wall seems even higher, the acknowledgements even rarer, the records even thinner. The unit even has an old, almost poetic nickname for its operators. They are called swimmer canoeists. Not commandos. Not raiders. Swimmer canoeists, a name that sounds almost gentle, attached to some of the most dangerous men Britain has ever fielded. Their motto fits the whole picture. By strength and guile. Not strength alone. Guile. Cunning. The art of not being seen. Now, how do you even become one of these ghosts? Selection for the SBS is famous inside the military precisely because so few outside it understand how brutal it is. The early part is shared with the SAS. Candidates grind through the same notorious hill phase in the Welsh mountains, marching for days under crushing loads, sleep stripped away, the weather doing half the work of breaking them. Men quit in droves. Men have died on that mountain. That alone would be enough to thin almost any group of soldiers down to a handful. But for the SBS, passing the hills is only the door. After that comes the part the SAS does not face, the maritime phase. Now add water to everything. Diving for hours in cold, black, zero-visibility sea, breathing from a closed system that leaves no trail of bubbles for an enemy above to spot. Long swims in full kit, dragging weapons and equipment through current that wants to push you off course. Handling small boats and canoes through surf and breaking waves in the dark. Learning to read a coastline you cannot really see. Learning to approach a ship or a beach from below the waterline, unseen, and to come up at exactly the right point, at exactly the right minute, with the whole operation depending on it. There is a particular cruelty to cold water. It steals your strength, your dexterity, your will, faster than almost anything else on Earth, and these men are asked to think clearly and fight precisely while it is happening to them. It is one thing to be a superb land soldier. It is another to do all of that wet, cold, and silent, with the sea trying to kill you the whole time. The men who pass are a fraction of a fraction. So we have a unit that is smaller, quieter, harder to film, and clamped down on by its own government. But none of that would matter if the SBS did not actually do remarkable things. So let us name the operations, carefully, because much of this work is officially unacknowledged and we will tell you honestly where the record goes quiet. Return to that tanker from the cold open. The operation was reportedly known as Operation Nave Andromeda, Nave, Andromeda, and it unfolded in the autumn of 2020 off the Isle of Wight, the island just south of the English mainland. According to published accounts, a group of stowaways aboard a large oil tanker became threatening, and the crew sealed themselves inside a protected part of the ship. As darkness fell, the SBS launched. Operators fast-roped from helicopters onto the moving vessel, swept it compartment by compartment, and retook control. Reports at the time put the action at around 9 minutes. Every stowaway was detained. Not one person was killed. It was, in many ways, the unit in perfect form, decisive, fast, and over almost before anyone knew it had begun. If you have made it this far, you are already one of us. Cadets get every video 24 hours early and a badge in the comments. The link is below. Sit with the difficulty of what that takes. The ship was not tied up at a dock. She was moving on open water, a vast slab of steel rolling on a gray autumn swell, her deck slick and pitching. A helicopter has to hold a hover above a target that is sliding and heaving beneath it, while men drop down a thin rope into wind and salt spray, one after another, with no room to miss. Land badly, and you go over the side into a cold sea at night. Land well, and you are standing on an enemy-held vessel the size of a small town, with no idea exactly where the threats are hiding in a maze of corridors and tanks and stairwells. To do all of that, and finish it in minutes, with nobody killed, is not luck. It is thousands of hours of rehearsal that the public never sees, the boring, grinding, repeated practice that turns chaos into routine. And then, the moment it was over, the men were gone, and the official statement said almost nothing. But Nave Andromeda is recent, and the unit's roots run far deeper. To understand the SBS, you have to go to the South Atlantic. In 1982, Argentina seized the Falkland Islands, a remote British territory in the freezing Southern Ocean, and Britain sent a task force 8,000 miles to take them back. Long before the main landings, small teams had to go in first. According to published histories of the campaign, the SBS was among the very first British forces on the ground, including operations to recover the island of South Georgia and reconnaissance work along the bleak, windswept coasts where the main assault would later come. Picture men in tiny boats and canoes, soaked and frozen, paddling toward an enemy-held shore in the dark, then lying motionless for days in the wet ground, watching, counting, reporting back. No glory in the moment, just cold and patience and risk. That campaign is one of the clearest windows we have into what the unit was built to do. Then comes the era after the attacks of 2001, when British Special Forces deployed repeatedly to Afghanistan and Iraq, often in ways the government still will not confirm. One episode that has been widely reported is the prison uprising at a fortress called Kala-i-Jangi in northern Afghanistan in late 2001, where detainees revolted inside the walls and a vicious battle erupted. According to published accounts, British and American Special Forces, the SBS reportedly among them, were involved in the desperate fight to contain it. We flag this carefully because the official British position remains that it does not discuss such operations, and the fullest details may never be confirmed. There is also the long, grinding shadow war against piracy off the Horn of Africa. For years, in the waters off Somalia, hijackers seized merchant ships and held crews for ransom, climbing aboard from small skiffs in the open ocean and turning cargo vessels into floating prisons. Maritime special forces from several nations, and by many published accounts, the SBS among them, operated in those seas, recapturing vessels and protecting crews. Imagine the problem, in reverse. The pirates came from the water to take the ship. To take it back, you have to do the same thing better, approaching unseen, getting men onto a high steel hull from a small boat or from the air, clearing it deck by deck without getting the hostages killed. This is exactly the kind of work the unit was designed for, the boarding of a ship at sea being its oldest and most natural skill, the thing those wartime canoe raiders first proved could be done. And it is exactly the kind of work that almost never produces a headline with a name attached. Do you see the pattern now? Tanker off England. Frozen recon in the Falklands. A prison fortress in Afghanistan. Pirate waters off Africa. Across 40 years, the same unit keeps appearing at the worst moments, and across all of it, the same silence holds. The SAS gets the film. The SBS gets the rumor. So, here is the question worth fighting about, and I want your answer in the comments. Which is actually the smarter way to run a Tier 1 unit? The SAS path, where fame became a recruiting tool and a deterrent, where the world saw what Britain could do and thought twice. Or the SBS path, total invisibility, where the enemy never even knows which force is coming for them, and where secrecy itself is the weapon. One school says a legend you can see protects the nation. The other says the most dangerous knife is the one nobody can describe. Tell me below which side you are on, and tell me whether you think the public has any right to know what these men do in its name. I read the arguments. The best ones change my mind, because here is the part that should sit with you. We have walked through named operations tonight, but every one of them came wrapped in the words reportedly and according to published accounts, and that is not me being cautious for fun. That is the actual state of the record. The British government, by design, will not confirm most of it. Which means everything you just heard is the visible tip, and the true history of the Special Boat Service, the operations that never got a leaked name at all, is still locked away, possibly forever. Official members get the parts that do not survive the public versions, the names and the details we cut before publish. The door is below.